Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a source that, well, it really doesn't hold back. It's Levne Morton's article, Grim Associations, from the Wall Street Journal. This piece, it's from early October 2025, so it's very current in its context, and it's immediate, quite visceral, using history almost like a weapon. Now, Morton's perspective is really shaped by his own experiences, his own lessons learned facing anti-Semitism back in the Soviet Union, and he looks at what's happening globally now and makes this incredibly stark claim. He feels what's unfolding is, and I quote, even more dangerous than the anti-Semitism of the past. So, our mission today is to really unpack that severity. Why does he feel this current hatred, he calls it global, broad, and boiling, is uniquely threatening? And how does he use these geopolitical signals to argue that history warns us Jews are often the first community to pay the price when things turn this way?
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial to start with his frame of reference. I mean, when someone who's lived through that kind of state repression, systemic prejudice, when that person says the present danger is worse, you really have to listen closely to the metrics they're using. For Emoton, the danger isn't just, the intensity in certain spots. It's the incredible scope, and maybe even more, the speed at which this seems to have unified across continents. He's seeing something coordinated, international, not just isolated incidents. And that, for him, as of late 2025, signals immediate acute danger.
Okay, let's follow that thread then, the global scope. What specific immediate evidence did he point to? What shows this unmistakable wave moving so fast across such different places?
Well, he anchors it right away with concrete, violent examples, makes it very real. In Britain, he points directly to a terrorist attack on a synagogue. 2 people killed, others wounded. Just a horrifying targeted act. But, and this is just as important for his argument, it's the normalization he sees elsewhere, particularly in the United States.
All right, the U.S. campus situation. He mentions that quite a bit in the source material. He almost dismisses it, saying it's already treated like old news. What specific actions on American campuses does he focus on as part of this grim normalization?
It's the ritualistic aspect of the demonstrations that seems to worry him most. He notes the specific spectacle burning U.S. and Israeli flags together, side by side, while waving Palestinian and Hamas banners. And for the author, the fact that these actions, which are, let's face it, profoundly radical, often using explicitly violent rhetoric, the fact that they've become almost routine on campus, not really drawing widespread outrage anymore or serious pushback from institutions, that signifies to him that the basic defenses against this kind of hatred are just eroding, especially among young people.
That idea of normalization is genuinely chilling, makes hatred seem almost like, I don't know, background noise. But then he pivots. He goes to a place many wouldn't immediately think of as a kind of signal flare for a global catastrophe, Italy. He specifically calls out sunny, joyful, seemingly carefree Italy. What happened there that made it so central to his warning?
Italy provides the sheer scale that his argument needs to make its point. The source cites an Associated Press report. It details this massive general strike, October 3rd, 2025. We're talking more than 2 million people, mobilized across over 100 cities. That's huge. Now, the stated aim was political, supporting an aid flotilla, supporting Palestinians in Gaza. But the atmosphere was clearly very tense. Clashes broke out. You had protesters throwing bottles, police using smoke bombs. It wasn't just a peaceful march.
Okay, but let's pause on that claim for a second. Is he really saying that a general strike in Italy, even one with clashes, does that really signal a return to, like, fascist-era complicity? That feels like a massive leap, doesn't it? From a specific political protest to pre-Holocaust conditions. How does he bridge that huge historical gap?
And that is the critical question, you're right. The author addresses it, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. He's not comparing the ideology directly. He's comparing the mechanism, the speed of mass societal alignment, the preparation. He argues these millions marching carry, quote, undertones far darker than just support for Gaza. His point isn't that these 2 million people are suddenly fascists. It's that this scale of mobilization, 2 million hitting the streets at once, it shows a kind of fever pitch, a collective passion, a moral certainty that historically can be very easily manipulated.
Okay. So the sheer size, the 2 million figure itself, that's the huge warning sign. It's not necessarily the specific demands of the strike.
Precisely. And this is where that historical parallel becomes, well, strategic for his argument. He argues Italy in the 1930s played a similar preparatory role. Mussolini's fascist regime, he says, set the tone before Hitler's rise really hit its peak severity. Italy, he stresses, prepared the ground.
What does that preparation look like, historically speaking? If we look back at 1930s Italy, what was that slow creep, the public acceptance, the political moves that came before the actual laws?
Right. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't an instant jump to deportations. It was incremental.
Yeah.
Legislative steps, shifts in public mood. The key historical association he emphasizes is Italy's racial laws of 1938. These laws, they stripped Jews of their rights, banned them from jobs, segregated them completely. That was the pivot point. It marked the start of Italy's direct operational collaboration in the Holocaust deportations, killings, complicity. So the author sees those 1938 laws as the outcome of an environment that was first inflamed, made receptive to prejudice. And he sees the current societal boiling point in Italy, that massive mobilization, as mirroring that preparatory phase.
That reframes the scale of the current rallies entirely, makes it much more unsettling. It stops being just about the specific issue they're protesting and becomes about the demonstrated potential for rapid, huge, passionate alignment against a perceived enemy.
Exactly. When you see millions mobilized like that, the context just shifts. It moves beyond fringe extremism. It suggests a fundamental societal movement might be underway. And this is what leads him to pose that central, really terrifying question in the article. If Italy is boiling, what will happen when Germany begins to simmer?
Okay, let's transition then. Germany. Historically, no nation has arguably put more resources into preventing exactly this kind of societal reawakening. For decades, Germany fought anti-Semitism intentionally, official policy, education, this whole memory culture. So why does the author feel this huge, long-standing, heavily funded protection is now fading?
He points to something almost biological, really. A generational mechanism for this failure. The generations carrying the direct, the visceral, the painful memory of the Holocaust, those who saw it or lived right in its immediate shadow, they are inevitably passing away. And when that direct living memory fades, well, a void opens up.
And what does the source suggest fills that void?
Ideology. Ideology fills the void. Specifically, a new, energetic, large group of young people stepping into the public square. The author describes them as passionate, restless, and easily swayed by simplified slogans. Sound familiar? These are the very people who might have been shielded by Germany's strong memory culture in the past. But now, he fears, they're receptive to the simplified, often quite radical messaging he saw on U.S. campuses and implicitly in the streets of Italy. The fear is that Germany's robust institutional memory culture, it might just be ineffective against a globalized, digitally turbocharged ideology that just bypasses official channels.
Right. And this brings us to the core of his thesis, doesn't it? The difference between Italy and Germany. He states very clearly, if Germany awakens, the danger is far greater than Italy's. So connecting this to the bigger picture, why is Germany the potential catalyst for catastrophe while Italy just inflames passions? What's the difference?
It really boils down to geopolitical gravity, weight. Italy inflames passions. It shows what mass mobilization looks like on the ground, a warning flare. But Germany, because of its tremendous weight in Europe, its economic clout, its political influence, its unique history, Germany has the capacity, the author argues, to turn that continent-wide passion into continental catastrophe. The consequences if the German political system and its youth embrace this shift. They're seen as fundamentally destabilizing, not just for Jewish communities, but for the entire European structure. He's basically suggesting that when Germany acts on intense ideological passion, the world notices and often follows.
That differentiation, Italy as the signal, Germany as the detonator, it really clarifies the geopolitical urgency he feels. And thinking about his background, having seen that slow, systemic prejudice in the Soviet Union, he must be just terrified by the speed and the scale of what he perceives today.
Absolutely. His Soviet experience is the lens here. It's key. He knows firsthand how quickly a broad societal mood can morph into official state policy, especially when that mood is widespread and passionate. So to sum up his core thesis, he sees Italy's huge rallies not as isolated political events. No, he sees them explicitly as a signal flare, the early tremors, he says, of something much bigger, threatening to engulf the critical mass of Europe.
So what's the most urgent takeaway then? For the listener hearing this grim projection, what's the mistake the author is practically begging us not to repeat?
The central urgency is really a call to, well, radical alertness, based explicitly on the precedent of the 1930s. The great mistake, he argues, is pretending this is only about Gaza or only about protests, that it's just a political disagreement over specific policies. He sees those as vehicles for a deeper, more pervasive global hatred that's finding popular traction. And if the geopolitical heart of Europe, Germany, lets its institutional memory fail, lets its powerful youth fully embrace this sentiment, The analysis suggests the consequences will shake the core of Europe. It's a stark warning.
It certainly provides a framework for looking at current events that leans heavily on historical association. It demands we look beyond the stated reasons for a movement and focus hard on its potential impact. So, given these grim associations the author draws between now and the 1930s, the really tough question for us, for you listening, is how do we distinguish between genuine political protest, focused on specific policy changes, and movements carrying those dangerous historical undertones far darker that Neymotin warns us about? That's the difficult but maybe necessary question we all have to keep grappling with as we watch these global events unfold.